meeting to order. Thanks for everyone that is coming. Can everyone on Zoom hear me okay?
Can you give a heads up if you can hear?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Everyone
That's a
good?
better way to do that. I did that the last time, and if they can't hear you, they can't respond.
I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. Thanks for coming. I'm going to read the right to know. As chair of Plymouth School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to executive order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. For the July 28th school board meeting, we are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. You can find the Zoom information on the SAU website, www.sau48.org, located on the agenda and the announcement section, and also on the school website. On the agenda under the school board section. It's also posted on the door of the school. If you're not able to access this meeting, please contact Michelle McCauley at mmccauley@pennybaker.org. If the public cannot access this meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Okay, so agenda review and disposition.
I do not have anything to add or take
Okay.
away.
So let's get right to it. I do want to.
I have something I wanted to
Oh, yeah,
add
that's
under
right.
other business, for facilities.
Okay.
We just have a facilities issue.
And I just want to go to say that if you have a public comment, when we get to the public comment section, that we're going to be limiting it to 3 minutes for public comments so that we can make sure that everyone is heard and all voices are heard. And we're not here till 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get right to it.
So I would just ask if the board members have questions, stop me. If not, we're going to try. We have a lot to kind of go through. We found that in the presentation, it's easier to write down questions and ask those after, or else you can get distracted, especially around certain issues like masking. That seems to. So
I do want to say, I'm sorry, I forgot to say this, that if all the handouts, if you're in the room, are at the back counter.
right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just a note to the public, the handouts will be available on the websites after the meeting. We are still formatting some issues, so once it's approved, as you know, this process has been moving fairly swiftly, so we'll update. We just want it to be professional and right before we post, and we'd like the board to approve it. So I'm going to start tonight
So are you saying you're going to go through it and then the board will pose questions?
Then so I would ask that we go through everything.
Okay.
You ask any questions with each section. And then.
Okay, with the section.
We have recommendations at the end of our presentation.
Yeah.
And then I would recommend to the board that if you have any questions, and then open it up to public input and vote on those recommendations after hearing the public.
Okay.
Okay? That's just my suggestion, if you're okay with that.
That sounds good.
So, a lot has happened in a month, or, since the last time we've met with you. There has been, and I've been putting out videos weekly, as well as now writing some of the press release summary as well. Just as far as process, for those of you who have not seen some of the videos, we have, at the end of the school year, we sent out a survey to parents kind of getting feedback on remote learning and what their hopes and concerns were for the upcoming school year. A lot has changed within that month, so we decided to send out another survey a few weeks ago at this point, asking parents, one, what are their thoughts on a instructional model? And it really is not a confirmation of what folks wanted, but a dipstick to see where the communities were. We looked at, could you provide your own transportation, as we were looking at buses as a possible barrier to getting back in the building, and just an opportunity to give us other comments, whatever they wanted as far as feedback. So we have taken all of that consideration as well. Over the past month, we've had We formed what was an SAU 48 task force. The purpose of that task force was to come up with resources in every category required for the reopening. I am proud to say that we had close to 70 teachers volunteer their time on every subcommittee to help come up with the plan. I'm really thankful to have the faculty and staff here because they're the experts in the classroom as well. So I want to say thank you to all of them. We had administrators on that task force. We had pediatricians, local health officials, school board members, and every other community stakeholder you could think of to give input for our schools. As you know, we have 7 different elementary schools and 1 regional high school. Each district or each school approves their own plan. There are different teachers' unions in each district, as well as different circumstances as far as the building and as far as logistics. So it really is not a one-size-fits-all model for SAU 48. We released the recommendations to our buildings last week after we got the governor's guidelines to really sift through what we were going to propose that's common among the SAU 48 schools and really what pieces we had to look through that's specific to the building. One unified recommendation that you'll be hearing is that we are going to recommend that we exceed the governor's recommendation for encouraging masks to requiring masks for students, faculty, and for visitors. So we have more details on that, obviously, when Tanya gets into her presentation. But I think it's the right thing to do given where our community is at and our expectations for kids. A lot of it will be teaching and learning best practice, like we teach best practice in hand washing. Is it done perfectly all the time by a 5-year-old? No, but we will teach and follow through and do what's developmentally appropriate for students. The other pieces, safety has been our top priority. We met with the local physicians on Friday to review all of our protocols. So another unified piece is our screening tools that we're using for staff and for students, and any response to positive symptoms or positive cases of COVID. So that you'll see unified throughout the SAU 48. It's pretty clear cut as far as what we have to do in response to any of that. I'm happy to say we have a great partnership with our local health providers that have validated and supported our plan that we have sent to them prior to presenting that to you tonight. I think it's important to follow the recommendation of health officials and physicians during this time. Oh, sorry, that's an echo. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. So that's the important piece now, is to listen to the physicians and do what's right locally for our kids. So based on the surveys that we got, that we received a few weeks ago, we had a ton of responses, and I mentioned last week or the week before that we had about 80% of parents say they would like to send their kids back to the building in some sort of instruction, and about 20% that are not ready at all. So it was pretty clear on the feedback. Some of the comments include masks to no masks, to mitigation strategies, to other suggestions as well. So we have taken all of that input, shifted it over to the building level. So Tanya has been working with Kelly, and Tanya have been working with the teachers union leadership and the custodian. Who else is on your team?
Well, then we've also met with a mental health team and a technology team.
And a technology team as well. So they've been working hard to make this plan all about Plymouth Elementary School. So tonight's proposal will be highlighting the important parts of the plan, as well as specific recommendations to the board to approve, so we can start moving forward as far as communicating with families, teachers, and the other community members as folks are anxiously awaiting what's happening. but we wanted to make sure we did it and we had a clear plan as of today, based on today's data. As you know, the document is fluid. So again, that's our plan today. We'll be meeting a little bit more frequently as a board to tweak if we need to. It's at the board level that it would be tweaked. So we will, I'm sure, do that at some point. But with given all the resources at this point, we are following CDC guidelines for most of the recommendations, as well as some recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics, the New Hampshire Back to School guidelines, and
Department of Public Health.
the Department of Public Health. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Tanya to start reviewing what her plan looks like and some of the recommendations that she'll be reviewing, unless any of you have questions about kind of how our initial oversight has happened. No?
Frank, do you have any questions? Okay.
No.
So I'm going to share my screen and take people through a little slideshow that takes you through the document. I'm not going to speak to every point in the Plymouth Elementary School Back to School guidelines, but I have sort of an overview of each section, which I think will help the conversation. So, as Kyla said, Kelly and I have worked really hard together, and I want to thank Kelly right off the bat because she has, we've gotten to know each other really well in the last 3 weeks, and it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you, so thank you. We also have met with the union leadership 4 times, about 2 hours a time, an hour and a half to 2 hours each time, to really work with them as collaborators on this plan, and I'm proud of the work we've done together. That's been meaningful and respectful and student-centered, so I'm really proud of that work. Also want to thank the technology team and the wellness team. As Kyla said, it is fluid, it will change. So this is a moment in time, and we will work to communicate well about any changes as we move forward. We set our work on some foundations of safety first and in-person instruction being the most effective instruction. And we will be entering, I'm gonna, hold on. It's not going to let me. Hold on one sec, folks, while I figure out how to share my screen from. Oh, hold on one moment.
You're getting a perfect experience of how remote learning is done.
Kara, can you help me for 1 second?
Bringing in the reinforcements.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why she's here.
Are you trying to just minimize?
I'm trying to
Advance to the.
advance without
Do the arrow. It's not letting you.
Nope.
Oh,
There we go.
I went too far. Just use the arrow.
There.
Okay, there we go. So we will be entering school at level 3. What I want people to know is that we're basing all of our work on these 4 different levels that a school might be in based on the COVID positive rates in the region, okay? And what all of the SAU 48 schools are doing is entering at level 3, which is in-person instruction with moderate mitigation strategies enforced, but support for remote instruction, okay?
And what we mean by remote instruction is that parents will have a choice to choose in-person instruction or remote learning. So we are proposing going back to school 5 days a week, but folks that aren't ready to come back will have a remote learning alternative. I want to be clear with that because I think sometimes that can be confusing.
And I want to be clear about what the mitigation strategies are. So there is enhanced cleaning of surfaces on high traffic areas. There is screening of all students and staff. There is signage about masks and hygiene. Face masks or coverings are required. There's limited interaction between students. There's no access for visitors, and there's very minimalized travel within the building. So level 3 actually has some very specific components to it as laid out in our plan, okay? One moment, everyone. We're just having more.
All right, pull it back up. You just have to press it.
Press. What am I being?
Your side shoulders. Your side show.
There it is.
Here, I'm just going to do it down here.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. All right, the next section in the plan is the school management and communication section. It's found on page 4 in the written document that you have in front of you. And what is important in this section to make note of is that Dana Andrews, who is the new assistant superintendent, will be the district coordinator for COVID-19 related questions around infection or potential infection, and that Kelly and I will be the building level COVID-19 coordinators. Also in that section is an identification of a back-to-school team, and that includes Karen McLeod, Edna Miller, Jen Deloge, John Cormia, who is a custodian, John Ramsey, and Jenny Lee from the front office. And that's the team that's been working most hard in the last few weeks. The communication team is going to be Kelly and myself, Jen Deloge again. I'm going to ask Geneva Sambor to join that team, and then Jenny Lee and John Ramsey. And that group will be working hard to send out school messenger messages, videos, to update the school website, to use social media and the phone and both visual and verbal prompts within the building to make sure that we are following the guidelines and communicating the guidelines and any updates to the entire community. I get into this a little further in the presentation, but I do want you to know that we are updating the website as we were updating it today, and we will be moving to new websites for the school and the entire building, a Google website, which will streamline our communication and make it much more user-friendly. I'll get into more of that in a bit. So that team that I identified will be working to make sure that all of our community members understand the screening process, because all adults, all staff, and all students who come into the building will need to be screened daily. What I want you to know is that parents will self-screen the children at home. Okay, and we will give them a screening tool to do that. I believe at this point that it will be digital, and we will have a digital tool for screening. And staff will be responsible for screening themselves and recording that information themselves. The symptoms are listed in the document, and we will do a good job of educating our students and staff about what the symptoms are. There will be 3 questions. Do you have symptoms? Have you had close contact with someone who is suspected or confirmed to have COVID-19 in the past 14 days, or have you traveled in the prior 14 days outside of New England? What I want to make a note of that's really important as a possible change for families this coming year is that if you answer yes to any of those questions, you need to stay home, because the potential, and that's very different. I, as a mother, know that I've certainly said to my children, you're fine, go to school, right? But this is a different year with the risks associated with that being very different. So families will need to really think. We're going to have kids home a little bit more possibly, okay? The next section in the document is how we are going to prepare the physical environment as we get ready for students to come back in the building. They haven't been here since March. So I want to be really clear about the things we are doing to ready the environment. First of all, masks are going to be required. Not optional, required, unless you're physically distant. So if you're sitting 6 feet away from people, then you're being physically distant. If you're outside, you know, there's fresh air and you can be physically distant, it's a good time for a mask break. I also want to let you know that we will be cohorting in a different way than this building is used to. And what that means is that, think about it like self-contained classrooms, K4. So if your student has a homeroom class, rather than rotating through to from Mrs. Stokey's room to Mrs. Apriliano's room, you would stay in your classroom for the day so that you don't mix with other students and to really limit the exposure between adults and students. In the 5th through 8th grade, we are going to keep class or groups together. Those individuals may move between classrooms. We're not 100% sure about how we can make that all happen based on the science labs and some of the other things, the access to the materials in the different classrooms. But cohorting as much as possible will be our goal around that. Part of preparing our physical environment has also meant that I've gotten to know a lot about our HVAC system in the last 2 weeks, and I want to let you know that Plymouth Elementary School is above and beyond what many of the other schools in the state have. So we have an air handling system that refreshes 20% of the air continually, constantly, and we have an ultraviolet decontamination system that takes out very small microns and really works to have very clean air in this building. We've had people visiting our school to see our HVAC system in the last 2 weeks because it's so high quality. We have 7 air handling units throughout the building for that system. There's one for each wing, one in the PE, and one shared, one for the cafeteria, and then one shared for the main offices, okay? And we have gone through every single room in the building. I've checked to make sure that there is an intake and an exhaust in any space that children or staff will be in. So no one will be in a space that does not have that air handling system set to it. Also involved in readying the physical environment is the cleaning protocols. And what I want you to know is that we have an electrostatic cordless sprayer that will be used in classrooms, which is sprays the surfaces, and that we use 3 cleaning agents: Grout Smart, ViroTab, and Vital Oxide to clean surfaces. And outlined in the document is the nightly cleaning routine. I'm not going to go through that at this point. In addition, classrooms are being readied for students, and John Cormier and I have a tape measure that we've had out in almost all of the classrooms. We have no less than 5.5 feet between each desk, and in many cases 6 feet. And a couple places that Mrs. Carey and I visited today, we thought, you know what, we could even expand that if we need to. So I'm really surprised and excited about the fact that we don't have kids 3 feet apart. We have kids 5.5 to 7 feet apart, really, in this building. It has meant a major shift in furniture in the building, and I saw so many teachers join this meeting. I want you to know we are not getting rid of any furniture, but we are making space for the student desks within the classrooms. And then the common areas, just in terms of readying the environment for those, we're going to have very limited use of the common areas by large groups, but they will be cleaned and set up for a physical distancing. And I do want to point out that I'm using the word physical distancing instead of socially distant, because we all need to be social, we just need to be physically distant. So another component of this plan is how we're going to support our students and families and educators. Our entire nation, and in fact our entire world, is going through a period of real uncertainty, and we all need to take care of ourselves through that. And the mental health team is going to work to support teachers both in how they support students, but also in making sure that we're taking care of each other and that people are getting time to express their concerns and their questions, and that their needs are really listened to and thought about. The teachers specifically will be given some strategies and activities to support students in the classroom, using responsive classroom as the foundation for most of that work. There'll be check-ins with students either in writing or verbally, and the special ed team will be taking referrals about students that faculty feel like are at risk. And the special ed team will work really hard to make sure that the students who have learning differences get explicit specialized instruction in things like hand washing or explaining of COVID-19 questions, because those students may need extra support in this time. And that's laid out well in the plan. I'm not going to get into the details of that tonight. I do want to just say the way that I plan on managing this and have managed this is with communication and transparency. So I think that that's the most important thing in terms of taking care of parents and students and staff, is that we're really open and transparent about our dialogues and communication. That's the most important. Oh, I've skipped a slide, one moment. So as Kyla said, there are two choices basically for learning platforms. But before we even get to that, I do want to point out that we need to reacclimate and come back together as a community, and that is built on connection and answering questions and learning new routines. So that will be the foundation of the work that we do. Once students are in the building, we will be doing some baseline achievement levels. The state is requiring us to do the SAS testing, and we as a district use NEWA testing, and that will be a component of our fall work. Parents, as Kyla said, will have this choice between the in-person model or full-time remote instruction. And the in-person model will look very different. It's going to be physically distant. It will be masks on. It will not be hanging out in the hallways or hanging out in the morning for 45 minutes on the playground. We're really going to have kids get directly into the building in the morning, and recess time will look very different because we won't have 100+ kids on the playground at a time and things like that. So if you're choosing that, you need to know you're choosing something that looks a little different than what it's looked like in the past. If you're choosing full-time remote, that will be through the free New Hampshire supported program called VLAX, which stands for Virtual Learning Academy Charter School. Okay? And that is taught by certified educators. It's an online program. They will be doing the teaching, not Plymouth Elementary School teachers. Plymouth Elementary School will provide weekly check-ins, some social emotional support, and possibly some help around how might you organize your day. Let's have a daily schedule for you. Let's check in with how you're doing on your timeline in your class. But that's what that would look like. So our faculty will not be running remote instruction. They would be running our in-person instruction.
Can you I would just ask folks to, instead of writing questions in the chat room, to hold your questions for privilege of the floor. Thank you.
I do want to point out at this point that if the building goes to a short-term remote situation, or if a class needed to go to short-term remote, that Kelly and I spent time reading the entire survey from late May, early June about remote instruction, and have a lot of ideas about what remote learning would look like if we needed to shift that way. And we don't have that all written down on paper for you tonight, but I want you to know it would include much more daily contact with teachers, a stronger daily routine, rigor of academic content. Specialists would be included in all students' programming, and that grades would not be optional, that student grades. So as we move forward with planning for the possible potential of remote learning, we will have a much more structured set of guidelines for what that would look like.
And I think the hope, if we shift into or pivot into remote learning, it's for a short period of time, like days, not months, hopefully. So that's our hope, that we just make that a little bit more robust as far as the remote learning.
So on page 16 and 17 of the guidelines is the technology section, and what I want the community to know is that we are moving ahead with going to one-to-one capacity, K-8. So all students would have a Google Chromebook. We've gone ahead and requested that already, so we're moving ahead with one-to-one capacity. In addition to that, we will be moving to school-level Google Sites. So our school website will get a major shift in the next 2.5 weeks to aid both with communication about COVID-19, but also just to help with general communication in this building. We will also be moving to teacher websites by team that are Google Sites that will all be consistent based on a template that Kara Lavasser and John Ramsey and I are working on with Beth Wilkie, Jeff Lines, and Geneva Sambor. So we are doing as much as we can to prep that so that teachers don't need to come in and create something new, or from scratch, not to create something from scratch. We'll do a lot of the head work for that. In addition, we will be using Google Classrooms in each team. So in order for us to be ready to pivot, everyone needs to be up and running on a Google Classroom. So that's going to be a big shift for this building, and it will be a non-negotiable. Everyone will be doing that. We are considering moving to Google Classroom as our Google Calendar as well, but we're holding off on that decision at this point.
Google Meet.
Google Meet.
Yep. Nope. Google Calendar.
Okay.
So we're exploring Google Calendar as a place to assign homework, because there are some things that students really like about Google Calendar. I want to make sure that it works for adults as well as it works for students. And we will be moving away from Zoom to Google Meet because it's more adaptive, and they've done a number of changes to it to make it work better for schools. In addition, Zoom is no longer free, and it caps their meetings at an hour. So it's more cost effective for us to use Google Meet.
And their security
And
is better. It's a better platform as far as that goes.
Want to talk for a moment about transportation, which is on page 17 and 18 in your document, okay? I want to be thankful to the parents. We are encouraging parents to provide transportation for your kids to get to school. The bus capacity could be a real barrier to getting kids into the building. So I want to say that right out loud to any parent who's listening, that we really do request that of you. And that I do want to say that parents and guardians need to pre-screen students prior to letting them board the school bus if that's how they're coming, or before they get in the family van to come to school. Okay, parents need to do that. And there are a list of requirements on this in this section. First of all, masks will be required on the bus. Okay, if you do not have a mask on, you will not be allowed to get on the bus. Okay, it won't be, I need to get it out. You have to have it on just to get on the bus. The drivers will be 6 feet on both sides from riders in the front seats. Passengers will be allowed to sit 2 to a seat. We will request that we start with family members in that section so that we work to reduce the potential COVID exposure. Students will need to face forward at all times, just like in the classroom. Assigned seats will be considered. We're working on who can manage assigned seats if a bus driver is driving the bus. And windows will be down, weather permitting. I do want to also say that there will be behavioral expectations around the mask. So if students take their mask off on the bus, it will be a call home, and we will have to manage that situation in the moment. But the expectation is that students wear a mask the entire time that they're on the bus, okay?
Although I think we understand the developmental issues
Yes.
of the kids that may have it all over the place, and now it's a teaching moment as well. So it's not perfect, but
You're right, and it's not an automatic. We may have to do some instruction
Yeah.
in that moment, right? And say it's really important that you do that. I do want to also in this moment talk a little bit about the traffic outside the elementary school. So if we have so many parents dropping off and picking up, Kelly and I have been thinking hard about the traffic flow, and I would request that people stay flexible with us about that, because we're thinking of really shifting the way things happen. Today, what we're thinking is that the school buses would pull through the high school lot all the way around, pull up in front of the SAU building with their doors open on the sidewalk side, and students would get out there. That would allow parents, because parents will not be allowed to get out of their vehicles, to swing into the school and drop on the sidewalk in front of the school, and then exit, pull around the lot and take a right on Old Ward Bridge Road and keep going. We know that the drop-off time will be a little bit congested, and we're going to have to work out the timing on that, and people will need to stay kind and flexible in that moment, okay? The afternoons we are still working on. We are thinking about dismissing to specific areas based on last name. It can be it can be a moment of uncertainty if you're coming out of the building and you don't know where your mom's car is and where to find them, right? So our thoughts as of today are that students would be dismissed to a specific spot on the campus where A to C, D, E, and F meets, so that it wouldn't be by grade, because for those individuals who have kids in multiple grades, that wouldn't work, right? So doing it by last name allows one spot every day, same spot to pick up your kids.
But you're not allowing parents to get out of the car. Okay.
We have to figure the afternoon out.
Yeah.
Kids will just need to learn to recognize cars.
Yep. Next is school meals and nutrition, and that's found on page 19 in the document. And we are still working with cafe services to finalize what this system will look like, because our cafeteria cannot have the entire third grade in it at a time. Well, that's not a good example. Fourth grade or fifth grade in it. There are too many individuals for social distancing. What we think we're going to do is not use the classroom dining model, but to use the order in the classroom, so that students would order their lunch in the morning. If they were taking hot lunch, that they would have a hot lunch option or a lunchbox option. They would go to the cafeteria and pick it up, and then some of them could eat in the cafeteria, some of them could eat outside, and some of them could eat in an alternative space, which may be available through specialist spaces that aren't being used because they're teaching in the classroom. What I want to say about the school meals and nutrition is that we're still working with cafe services to work out all the logistics of that, of who can handle food, and littles carrying trays, and some dynamics associated with that, okay? We also do not have a plan yet for breakfast. So I do want to let you know that the state, as I mentioned earlier, has included in their requirements the state assessments. So we will be doing the interim SAS assessments, I believe, late September or early October. And then SAU 48 District-wide, we will be using the NEWA. Obviously, with our kindergartners and our first graders who have just come back, we will be doing more hands-on assessments rather than those big computer tests in the beginning, okay? But it's really important that we evaluate where are we with achievement at a real individual level. So that's for good reason that we'll be doing that. And then we will review that data. That's not just going to go into a vacuum, disappear, and respond to it. At this point, I want to talk about the professional development section of the document, which is found on page 21. I am going to request that the school board amend the calendar tonight to add professional development days at the beginning of the school year in order for us to plan and prepare for the school year and the shift and the big changes in routine, the changes in the Google platform, and because we had already planned on Into Math training, a lot of our time was already identified for other things, and we really need some more time. So I will be asking that we add the 25th, 26th, and 27th as professional development days, and then the Friday the 28th would be a welcome back orientation day for families. And we don't have that day firmly designed yet for you, but it would be a day where possibly by wing we would invite families to come outside of the building, and we would educate people and inform people about the new routines, get to, meet teachers, parents, with being physically distant and outside of the building.
Just to interject real quick, so in the governor's presentation about the reopening guidelines, he had mentioned 3 days at the beginning of school. Those have been approved by the commissioner to count as days for school, so not adding additional days to the calendar. So those will count as part of the school days.
I also want to say one of the big reasons I want to do that is for our faculty. They need time to plan and to come back together and to get ready for this new big shift. So on page 22, 23, and 24 are some guidance around athletics, co-curricular, and music. And what I want to just let you know is that for athletics at this point, we are going to move ahead cautiously. We are still waiting for a little more guidance from the NHIAA, and we're not ready to tell you explicitly what our recommendation is around that, but we are going to proceed cautiously and explore some different options in the next few weeks. And come back to you with those recommendations at that point. In terms of co-curricular, we will be asking the question, can you be physically distant and can you wear a mask in order for that co-curricular activity to continue? And in the area of music, of band and chorus, we are waiting for some more guidance. I did speak with Jake Stevens today, and we have some good ideas about moving outside for chorus, and possibly purchasing some things for some of the instruments to make it feasible to still do some band, and to do it individually or in very small groups for both band and chorus. And he's also going to look in for donation guitars. Jake Stevens is looking for guitars because those don't take singing or breath to make happen. So a plug for Jake.
Gotta push your hands up.
I'm almost done, folks. So on page 26 and 27 of the document are other things to consider. And I think it's important that we make note that with the potential staffing issues that we may have, that substitutes is going to be a big issue of concern for us. I have reached out to some local folks about possibly coming in on a more regular basis to be a standby substitute or to help out if we have faculty who cannot return. Those substitutes will need to follow our screening protocol and our mask protocol, and we need to do a very good job of educating them about that. I want to point out that the plan calls in terms of visitors for no visitors in the building. That includes volunteers in the classroom. It would be only essential visitors, which would be therapists or people for IEP meetings when they cannot Zoom or Google Meet for that meeting. Another thing that we have been talking about in this section is crisis prevention and hands-on. So what I want you to know is CPI, which trains our individuals who help with kids who are in crisis or de-escalated, is putting out some guidance for us. But we will be working hard to make sure what we're really doing is preventing escalation and working on de-escalation. I want to let you know that we are recommending that for field trips, they be only virtual at this point, and that we move forward with possibly with outdoor classroom spaces and being outdoors, but that we have virtual field trips at this point. I also want to let you know about our Park and Rec after-school programming, which isn't on this slide, but Lisa Ash and I spoke, and that program is full with about 50 individuals. There's a wait list started. That is on track to be staffed by work-study students from the college, and I want to make you aware of that. They will be outside as much as possible, and they have been running their summer Park and Rec summer camp and are sort of in the lead of how to explain to kids and work with kids around the expectations for mitigation strategies.
Do you have time for a quick question on that?
Yep.
Do you know what the enrollment in the after-school program has been historically? Is 50 a big drop from what we've been able to do?
I do not know.
So I think that's running at reduced capacity.
Right. Okay.
So Lisa runs off the day camp stay-at-home advisory from the governor, so that is at a reduced capacity. I don't know if that will be lifted or not, but I think that's what she's following now for Parks and Rec for the summer.
Thank you.
I also want to, not on this, did I talk about the emergency management plan? I don't think I did. But that we will be working with the fire department and the police department to update our emergency management plan based on COVID. I also want to let you know that in terms of preschool in the building, Angie Gannett and I will be working on the hours associated with that to see if we could have preschool not entering the campus during our high traffic times. So when we have, all of those parents driving down Old Wardbridge Road and lots of people, that doesn't seem like the best time for our littlest kiddos to be getting in the building. So we'll be working on that in the coming weeks. I do want to point out at this point that in the plan there are a number of appendices, including a sheet that lists the screening questions. There is a section called frequently asked questions. There is a better description of the levels for entry, as well as a homeroom and classroom layout down to the number of feet at this point that we have between desks. So there's a lot of information in the appendices. As we move forward, this will continue to change with expert guidance. We encourage participation, so if parents have questions or comments about that, I really request that you reach out to Kelly or myself and let us know about that. We welcome open communication, and we're all going to have to be adaptive and change, so we just welcome the fact that we all get to grow a little bit, so that's a gift for us. And I ask that everyone look in the next 48 hours, parents need to look for a student learning platform choice. So in order for us to plan as we move forward, we need to know exactly what parents are choosing, because class groupings may change, class size may change, and we may shift many things based on those choices. We hope that this document helps you make an informed choice for your family, and we really think that we just have full honor for folks to make the choice that works for their family. So that's the presentation of the guidelines.
Okay. I know that I went through it and I wrote down some questions and I'm going to ask you, and then I'll have you guys do the same. Ask whatever questions you have, and Frank too.
I'm going to stop share.
So the part about, on page 5, under number 3, symptomatic persons will be instructed to contact their healthcare provider to be tested for COVID-19 in the site, self-isolate at home. My question is, will a negative test result be required to return to school?
So, no. So Kyla and I met with Dr. Ebner and Beth Smars and what's the nurse? School nurse?
Diane Reed.
Diane Reed. And the guidance is that we will not require, nor will they provide.
They will let us know if there is a positive case in any of our buildings. That's how they know.
Right.
And that may come from DHHS, because somebody can get tested anywhere, as far as Convenient MD in Belmont or anything. They will let us know if there's a positive case. So that's why it's more of a state piece, and they're not required to tell us specifically. But my understanding is DHHS will give us enough details to assist in contact tracing and anything like that.
Okay. In the parent screening, is that something that you're gonna require parents to email to you every day to prove that they've done it, or are you taking the honor system, their word?
We will be expecting them to be honorable, and they will need to do it we will not be expecting an email. There will be an online tool for them to use to do it, but we will not be checking that.
Hold on, just flipping through my pages here. On page 15, I know that the VLAX process, is that confirmed now, how to enroll in VLAX?
So they just got their process approved a few weeks ago to offer K-12 education for most of districts, because it becomes a resource issue as well. It is up and running. They're still, they just posted all the K4 pieces, because that's, or K3 documentation, is that's new. So I just went today, they have everything up there now, and then they have a COVID plan, really not making students and families jump through all the hoops that they previously did. It's going to be an option, here it is, and it's going to make it a little easier for the students.
Previously, I don't know if people know that much about VLAX, but historically, you had to pass a class before you could be a fully enrolled student in VLAX, and that requirement has been done away with. So they're trying to make it be much more user-friendly in that regard.
And at any point, if they decide they want to come back to school, that will be a seamless transition, or are they, your VLAX for the semester?
So we are asking that families that choose remote commit to that decision for a marking period. Same with transportation. Just because we're trying to staff up, and I think from what we've heard in other programs, if you offer both, most of the kids, or many of the kids, return within a week or two. So that would shift our entire plan. So we ask that you kindly commit to the marking period and then transition after that.
Okay.
When is the first marking period end?
It's a trimester, so I believe it's early November.
December 1st.
December 1st, from Carol Lavasser. There you go. I do really want to recommend to folks that if they're considering VLAX, to get on the website and look at it and ask to speak to someone and really explore what that would look like.
On page 17, you spoke about hotspots. When available, will be provided to teachers and students who need access to the internet at home if we have to make a pivot to remote learning. My question is, who is going to be responsible for getting those hotspots to students with?
John Ramsey and Carol Lavasser.
And that's what they did during remote. We
did
provided
that.
that anyways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Did we have enough volume or enough quantity of hotspots to provide that service?
Yeah, so we're using some of the CARES Act funds to ramp up our technology as well, to provide the one-on-one devices as well as any additional mitigation strategies that we need, including something like robust technology, including hotspots.
If I recall, we had included money in our budget last year to replace some of the
Yes, so that
Chromebooks.
covers some of it, yeah.
Are we buying more with that money and keeping some of the older ones in rotation, or?
Yes,
or-
there are many, we're buying about 180,
Okay,
and, but that's not enough for everyone in the building, so we are absolutely keeping the functional devices, and some of our even less functional ones we're keeping just as a, backup.
okay.
They will be labeled with the student's name, and 4th through 8th grade will be able to go home. At this point, what we're saying is that K3 would stay in the building, and if we pivoted, they would be available for those kiddos. Students would be responsible for charging them at home, so.
On page 18, as far as timing for the bus routes, so I know typically you were able to drop your child off in the playground so that you could go to work. So when I read this, due to the need for physical distance, classrooms open at 8:30, that's a concern for me as a working parent because I have to be at work at 8:30. So I know that other people, I'm sure, are gonna have the same question. Is that just a hard, is there gonna be
So
some
we're gonna have to discuss
flexibility?
that in terms of supervision on the playground and signing up for that, because we don't have enough staff to manage physical distancing and mask wearing on the playground. And this building actually, and I will admit myself as a parent, dropped my children off early, and that is really important. We're, in the beginning, we're going to need to really have very limited before school hours for kiddos. So as of tonight, it needs to be 8:30 because we don't have the supervision for kiddos to make that happen, or spaces for them to be in where they can be physically distant. I think that we need to do some more brainstorming about how we could make that happen, for possibly partnering with Park and Rec and doing some supervision that way. But our staff are not here early enough in order to supervise as many students as we need to in the way we need to.
Would parent volunteers, because it's outside, would volunteer parents be able to fill that role if they were willing to be trained in?
If they were, we could talk about it.
I think we can discuss it.
Yeah.
I don't know, at this point, it's not something we considered.
Right. I know we said we're not gonna have volunteers in the building, but if it's only outside on the playground, that would be a different situation. Anyway.
We can get back to you on that.
Pardon?
We can get back to you on
Yeah,
that once
there's no rush.
we flush that out,
Yeah.
And then I know you said we don't have a plan for breakfast.
So what I've discussed with Cafe Services is a grab and go, where kids would walk in and get a paper bag and be able to eat in their classroom. With limited eating in the classroom, the refuse and the smell potential at that time of day wouldn't be too bad. Kids need to eat in order to function. So we will figure something out about breakfast, and I will also be working with Dan Rosner around the monies in our fruit and veggie grant, and to make sure that we have some healthy options for kids later in the day during snacks as well.
On page 20, you spoke about baseline assessments being administered once students have been reacclimated to school. So when do you anticipate, how long do you think that will take?
I would say after the first week and a half or so. We've spoken about the fact that kids need to get back to learning, and to come right in and do the testing isn't quite right, but on the other hand, we also want to sort of get that assessment done with and get on to teaching, which is what we're really in the business to do, so. But not day one.
I think that was. And then if there is a student that needs to be out, they have to quarantine for 14 days, whether it's a positive or negative test?
So that's up to the physicians.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so they would let them, they would let us know.
Okay. Perfect.
that's not something that they would provide us directly.
Right, because of HIPAA.
Yeah, there's all these other.
Yeah. All right, and then as far as the dates for school, so would you eliminate that additional Friday off if you decided to start school on Monday, August 31st? Would you go Monday through Friday? Or would you still have the Friday after, before Labor Day off and Labor Day?
I would recommend keeping the Friday and Monday to just get us back in for a brief period of time, adjust as we need to on that Friday, and then, you know, us administrators can, if a busing issue, you know, those staggered weeks really help us clean up any major issues that come up that are unforeseen. So I'm sure there will be some. So I'd ask for that 4-day weekend for Labor Day.
I believe it's a 5-day.
It's not a 5-day
There's
weekend,
voting,
is
there's
it?
voting somewhere in there.
There is voting.
Yeah.
There is,
You're right.
thank you, you are right, yes.
Yeah,
It is a 5-day.
It's primary day.
It's primary day.
so September 8th is primary day, the school is closed.
It is closed.
September 8th.
Are we going to allow voting to happen here?
Voting is gonna happen here. Yep.
It's a lot of people in the building.
Well, they have
Gated. They will-
plans that they're working with.
So, on that, the town and they've asked for us to host a regional training for voting related to COVID-19, and they'd like to use the building on Friday the 14th, to be in the cafeteria only and to be physically distanced in that space with anyone from Grafton County, so that the people who run voting can come in and train everyone with the new requirements around voting. So I would ask, there would be 3 sessions because they're breaking it up into smaller groups. So I would ask your approval to have them in the building to do that tonight.
Why can't they find another place? Sorry to be rude, but I'm just saying.
I think that's far enough in advance
Yeah.
from anybody being in here that it's
think
not
so?
going to happen. Yeah, this thing
It
doesn't
would be
live
within
for
14 days.
2
yeah.
weeks.
Okay, that's,
I think I wouldn't have an issue with that.
I
okay,
would
just asking the
confident as
question.
well. Do you need a
But
motion?
it's a great question.
I would move that we.
Well, before we get to that,
Oh,
I had some questions. I don't know if anybody else had questions about
questions.
plan in general.
Oh.
So can we do that?
Yeah.
Can we get through questions
Yes.
about
Yeah.
plan and then do some motions?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, you're done.
I'm all set, I had
Phil,
all my
do you-
questions answered.
I really have one question, which is, I just wanted to clarify that our goal is to keep the kids in school as much as possible. For the parents who choose the in-person learning option, recognizing that there may be a need to remote learn for a few days or maybe weeks even. I just wanted to clarify that the students that, if we do switch to a remote learning environment, that's going to be instruction with the PES teachers and not the.
That's a great clarification question.
So we're
You're
going to have
correct.
parallel paths of
Right.
the kids who are in the VLAX system are going to stay
Right.
in the VLAX system, and the PES students who are working from home are going to be working with their
Yeah.
PES teachers remotely until
Correct.
they come back into the
Yes.
classroom. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that it seems
The
like that was
in-person
the plan.
kids stay with the in-person
Yes.
teachers,
Right.
the remote
Yeah,
students.
I just would not want the kids to try to switch into
No.
that track where.
Those could be short periods too.
Yeah.
No. So that's my only question. Thank you for clarifying that.
So to piggyback on that, if a student has symptoms and they're staying home 14 days, do they get any instruction
So we
during
will
that
work with
period?
those families, like that any kid is out of school, then
Okay.
that will be something that we look at. The new CDC guidelines, I don't think recommend 14 days anymore. They said to stick with our current policies with some of the symptoms, so that's as of the latest CDC guidelines on Friday. So that is, they've adjusted that a little bit, which we reviewed with the physicians as well.
Okay.
So it's specific in the packet that we sent out.
So one of my other
Did I-
questions is,
But I want to get back, you asked Fran about whether or not we would support the students if they were quarantined at
Yes.
home. And that's why we're moving to the Google Sites and the Google Classroom and Google Meet, that absolutely we would. And it would be and our job in the first week of school is to make sure that families and students really know about that platform so that it's real easy for them to access curriculum and potentially instruction at that point as well, depending
So-
on how many students are out.
Whether symptomatic or COVID positive, or my parents took me to, wherever, and I'm home for 14 days, they'll have access to online learning for those days that they're out. Okay, thanks.
But if the whole class is not quarantined, the teacher will still teach the students who are in their
Yes.
classroom, right? But that there would be resources on the website to
Students
support
don't fall
that.
behind.
Got it.
Is it possible to live stream a classroom in that case? So that if a teacher is giving lesson, the child at home can still be watching what's happening with their teacher?
So we've flushed that out a little bit. That is not a recommendation for us at this time, just due to some of the logistics of confidentiality as well, in streaming into a classroom. So we have not included that. I'm not saying we can't consider that in the future if something is happening. That's not something. Plus the devices, like the OWL devices that are used, that Plymouth State is using for kids to stream in, are $1,000 a piece per classroom. So we'd like to try what we have, and then if it's something, like I said, it's a fluid plan. If we need to switch and go with something else, we would absolutely take recommendations after speaking with teachers to see if that works as well. So,
Thank you.
yep.
so on page 7, there was a reference to, for the screening, I think for staff maybe, and it said something about New Hampshire. Is that supposed to say New England? There's something about travel. The last bullet on page 7 of the first section.
It should say
Students
something
and staff
around
inform
the-
building administrators of travel outside of New Hampshire. Does that need to be New England or?
What does it say?
It does.
It does say
outside
New
New
Hampshire.
Hampshire.
It should say New England.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
New England.
Okay, I just wondered. Yes. Okay. And I guess I wanted a little more clarification on page 7 of number 4. It was a little confusing to me. You want to read that? And
I'll read it.
Page what, Fran?
It's on page 7, number 4, at the bottom. Any person identified, da-da-da-da, will be required to quarantine for 14 days. So you're saying that isn't accurate?
So,
This may conflict with the latest CDC guidelines, so this
we're gonna update this.
is the DPHS.
Yeah, yeah. So you have to realize this has been typed up
Right.
in the same time as the new guidelines.
No, it's
Yeah.
great. I mean, I can't believe you guys put this together.
So
in
we're
the amount of
gonna-
time you did. I'm just,
Yeah, no,
you know me, I
yes.
just kind of
But
zero
we're
in
gonna
on
put a
things.
hyperlink in there right to the CDC site, so it's just automatically updated, and then our COVID coordinators connect with that
Okay.
regularly.
Looks like there's
to
a
see if-
typo, not a typo, but something is missing from there.
Yeah.
The way
Yeah,
that's
fall.
sentenced in there, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, fall to 2010 from their last day of exposure.
Something's
Yeah,
missing.
you're
So
right.
it
Yeah.
just
We'll
confused
fix
me.
that.
Okay.
Come on, you
Thank
couldn't get it
you.
right? All these pages, you couldn't get it right?
Well,
What's
we've
wrong
got
with
a
you
lot of
people?
moving parts, so we're open to
Very
suggestions.
One of the other things I sort of wondered about is, I know it has cleaning and cleaning supplies, and in different rooms it's got that Grout Smart or something. Is that for teachers to wipe down during the day, or what's that about?
So every classroom will have a bottle of Grout Smart in it.
Okay.
Which teachers can use if they would like to.
Okay.
In addition, the custodians will be using Grout Smart.
Okay. I'm just being a little obsessive, that I know, like, looking at all these products, like I have like bottles of oh dear God, I'm being videotaped. I have different bottles of squirting at home, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can Clorox it, you put it on for 10 seconds or something, but the hydrogen peroxide, you have to leave for 10 minutes, and that's why I just wasn't sure if teachers within a classroom, I mean, I know they're gonna be wiping down stuff and.
So we've
sort of
checked and
curious.
rechecked and rechecked again on this cleaning product.
I bet.
It does follow under the EPA piece. It is a hydrogen-based
Okay.
cleaner. I know one of the piece that families wrote in feedback is as far as not going overboard with all the
Bleach
other, the
chemicals.
strong chemicals. So we're
Exactly.
trying to strike a balance between what's approved to clean frequently and the more toxic cleaners. So we're,
Yeah.
that is what.
Seemed like a good, okay. Another one that I saw, I think it was on page 10, it said something about small group instruction, 3 feet apart. Is that without masks? or
That's with masks.
With masks.
Anytime you're within 6 feet, you're masked.
So the teachers could do a small group. They pull the kids over a small group, they put their masks on. Okay, so maybe,
Or come to a student's desk and cue them, but your mask would be on.
so, 2 other things I have. Some of the terminology I saw is like encourage kids, and I was sort of wondering, like, if middle school kids, encouraging them might not really just work as much as, is the intent that the teachers are telling them you have to put your mask on? Or are you just
Absolutely.
encouraging them to?
No, no.
Why don't you put
No.
your, I see that as very different
So here's-
terminology.
we've had a lot of conversation with this more at the high school as well.
Yeah.
And it kind of, it's more of a teaching moment for the little
Yeah.
kids. But as far as middle school kids, it is required. Now, if it's a mask that doesn't fit and they're not I mean, that's gonna be
Yeah.
the nature of it, whether it's below the nose or, on the
Yeah.
head, it's just, but if it's a complete refusal, I'm not putting the mask on. That follows the handbook as far as. not-
Belligerence.
Yeah, belligerence. as
So
far as
I guess I would
non-responsive.
just look a little closer at encouraging or those kind of terminology if that's not the case, so. And my last thing is, are we okay for staffing? Because I know,
So that's a
Do we
really
know
good
that?
question, and
That's something we're closely monitoring. I think after the plans roll out, we'll have a better understanding of, I think, everybody's waiting for the guidelines.
Okay.
Community members, parents, staff, so
okay,
I don't know.
thank you.
So, a comment, thank you to everyone who worked on this great document. It sounds like a true collaboration, and I appreciate the fact that we are in an unprecedented time in our history. We haven't dealt with anything quite like this in our lifetimes. So thank you for the work you did. It sounds collaborative. I appreciate the fact that fluid is a great word. No matter what great document we think we have today and great plan, in 3 or 4 or 6 weeks, things may be completely different. So I think everybody remaining flexible and fluid and adaptable is going to be absolutely critical to success. Thank you for doing all that. A couple questions with regard to level 2 versus level 3. How did we decide we're level 3 versus level 2 for reentry?
So reentry, we decided to go a little more strict, like a
Okay.
teacher at the beginning of the year. So typically, we wouldn't go with level 3 mitigation strategies because there is low to no spread in this area. But at this point, we're just going to practice the mitigation strategies.
Okay.
I think from the feedback, the overwhelming feedback and worry from the community as far as, okay, we've got to practice these pieces, go in a little bit more tight, and then watch the data and monitor it closely to move into any of the other levels. So that was
Okay.
that choice.
So we have a vision potentially of if there's an outbreak, we go to all remote. I don't know if we've thought about a threshold for, hey, this is the number that we say?
So we're taking our, the guidance from DHHS, and really, we would shift to remote for 2 reasons. One would be staffing.
Okay.
So if I have 10 teachers that are quarantined, I am probably going to call a remote learning day, not because of COVID spread, because of resources and staffing. The other reason would be for COVID spread, that we have a closure, which would be a recommendation from state health officials and local health officials. It just looks like it went to sleep. It's not really off. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
So that, we talked back and forth about specific data points, and we're more or less discouraged from that instead of pigeonholing us into like a specific data point, but really getting the local, really what is Plymouth Elementary. Because if I'm told to close at Plymouth Elementary, it doesn't mean I'm going to close Thornton Central School. So it's just a very different SAU as far as that goes. So I'll be looking to the health officials for the COVID piece. But there may be times when it's just the reality of it. If we have 10, 15 teachers out, I can't staff the building, so we will shift to remote so kids can get a day in.
And the expectation of those teachers that are quarantined would be to be teaching remote learning as well.
Yes,
Okay.
unless they're sick for the day.
Right.
Yep.
Conversely, we could theoretically decide, hey, it's November, nothing's happened, we don't have any cases in Plymouth. Maybe we could go down to level 2 if we think that's appropriate.
Right, and then just looking at where the vaccination process is
Yes.
as well, so those are.
Level 2 says no vaccine present, so
Yes.
yes, potentially we could.
Yeah.
Right, really the difference between level 1 and level 2 is how many cases are
Right.
present, the way I read it. That's reasonable. I may have missed it, and you may not have an answer yet. We didn't really talk about like phys ed or gym or any of those kind of things. Maybe we don't know yet.
We don't know, but we will have specialists teaching.
Okay.
Phys ed and gym would happen outside at this point. Or an adapted situation if it was pouring rain out, where we might use some health curriculum or something during that time. We'll be working with Deb McManus and Eli Chamberlain to develop a program. We want kids to be physical, to get exercise, and to, lots of kids come to school just for PE, so I'm fully aware of that and want kids in the building and having some fun.
Okay.
I think that's our biggest goal, is to not bring kids back and take all the fun things about
Yeah.
school out, and you're sitting in rows just doing content area classes, and you go home, because then there's real no point
Yes.
in coming back.
Especially-
I think we have to have all the experiences in a new and creative way. So I think we're going to try to do as much as possible so they are socializing again.
And then one final question, a clarification around masking. Are we thinking, so if we're in a classroom and we're 6 feet apart, are kids going to be able to take masks off, or are we thinking they're going to leave them on?
We're thinking if they're 6 feet apart, sitting in their desks,
Okay.
then they can take their masks off if they're
Okay.
6 feet apart.
Okay.
For a break.
Yeah.
So the expectation is your masks are on, but that we really have frequent mask breaks. Spending all day in a mask will not be doable for these kids, so.
Thank you.
Frank? Oh, wait,
Can't hear you, Frank.
give me 1 second.
Hang on.
There we go.
Go ahead.
I just had one question about Parks and Rec. You said it's staffed by PSU students,
That's
correct?
Correct.
Mostly. And do we know what their screening process is
They will have,
before they come to the elementary school?
I'm gonna answer. Can you hear me, Frank? So they will screen just like any visitor or anyone who comes into the building every day. So they will be expected to be screening. And part of our job as educating young professionals in the field is for them to understand that it's not optional. That in order to be employed, you have to follow the screening, and in order to come into the building, it's a requirement. So it will be our job to impress upon them that it's absolutely critical that they do that.
He's on mute.
Did you have another question?
No,
No.
I'm all set. Thank
Okay.
you.
So if everybody's good, I'll move on to the recommendations, and then I think if you are on Zoom and you want to speak after the recommendations, I think Amy Lee will coordinate that as far as if you just put, I would like to speak in the chat box instead of your question. Perfect. So whoever just did that, can I ask a question? That would be great. So we'll call on you as well as any public members as well. So, hold on a second.
The green sheet, for those of you who are here, are the recommendations.
So this is really a summary or highlights of the program we just went through as far as reentry. So I'm going to have, I can read the recommendations, so I'll just go through them. It's just a little bit more detailed as far as the areas that I think folks are really looking forward to as far as having answers. So I am going to ask that the board, if they're comfortable voting on these recommendations in the plan tonight, so we can get moving with the reentry, the implementation of the plan. Recommendation 1, do you have that on your, can you share that on your screen, Tanya?
Yes,
So
I
everyone
can.
can see?
It's gonna take me a minute, everyone, so yes, I can, but it's gonna take me a sec.
You have a lot of windows open there. You must be busy doing something.
Just a little. I'm not gonna close the Zoom. Hold on. No, let me go. My drive isn't up for some reason.
Okay. You can, I think, zoom into that a little.
Do I go to?
Can you make the font bigger, Kara?
What?
Can you make the font a little bigger? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay. So recommendation 1 is to open school for pre-K through 8 for in-person instruction for those students who are ready to return and are willing to follow safety protocols. For instance, required mask wearing with frequent mask breaks, maximize physical distancing, and increased hand washing. Recommendation 2, open a remote learning program K through 8 for students who choose not to return to in-person instruction or are unwilling to follow safety protocols. Remote learning will be facilitated and taught by teachers from the Virtual Learning Academy Charter School, a free platform for New Hampshire students. PES will provide supplemental supports. We would ask families to commit to this for at least 1 marking period. Recommendation 3, require masks for everyone with frequent mask breaks. Recommendation 4, require daily at-home COVID-19 screening for all students and staff. Recommendation 5, daily sanitation, disinfection of all classrooms and common areas. Recommendation 6, closure of in-person school if there is a lack of resources or evidence of school transmission of COVID-19 as determined by local health officials or DHHS. Recommendation 7, to get outside as much as possible. Recommendation 8, any person, staff, student, visitor displaying symptoms consistent with COVID-19 will be sent home. Length of requirement to stay home will be determined by the school nurse and building COVID-19 coordinator in conjunction with CDC guidelines with consultation from DHHS or Spear Memorial Hospital if needed. Recommendation 9, to change the Plymouth Elementary 2020 school calendar by delaying the start date for students in an effort to allow faculty and staff additional training and preparation. So those are the dates. Keep August 19th and 20th as PD days. Change August 25th, 26th, 27th to professional development days. Change August 28th to the first day of school, welcome back orientation day, to be determined, the details. And then school would fully open on Monday the 31st. Recommendation 10, cautiously move forward with interscholastic sports by following NHIAA guidelines. Those are supposed to be released on Thursday, I believe. Implement appropriate mitigation strategies and follow the New Hampshire Youth Sports Guidelines from the New Hampshire Stay-at-Home Advisory. Recommendation 11, continue to offer school bus transportation for grades K through 8. Mitigation strategies such as mask wearing, assigned seating as possible, and physical distancing if feasible. Ask ask families to provide their own transportation to assist in physical distancing on the bus. We would ask families to commit to taking the school bus or providing their own transportation for the duration of a marking period. Recommendation 12, to limit field trips to virtual or walking as approved by building administration. Recommendation 13, to limit building use to school functions,
Parks and
Parks and Rec after-school programming and voting. Recommendation 14, organize classrooms by cohorts as much as possible throughout the day. Recommendation 15, to move to a one-to-one Chromebook capacity K-8. And recommendation 16 is to adopt the Plymouth Elementary School back-to-school guidelines in its entirety. With that being said, you know, it is a I will be asking to schedule another board meeting in a couple of weeks to tweak anything as needed. So this is our, you know, it's a pretty big plan at this point. So I would recommend if there's any questions on those pieces, and then to the public if you'd like.
You guys have any other questions?
I don't have any questions on the recommendation.
Do you want to take audience questions?
Yes, I would like to ask the people that are here if they have anything to say.
Jen?
Jen?
Actually, I'm going to speak to two things. First of all, I have about teacher travel outside of New Hampshire and New England. I know of a case where someone has a very ill father in New York. So will that person have to quarantine if they go and see their father?
So that's interesting. We're going to be looking at some of the symptom screening because the CDC's piece does clarify that if you, instead of, the New England question came from the reopening guidelines for New Hampshire, and then if you look at the CDC guidelines, it really specifies if you've been to a hot spot or where there's community spread. So I think we can reconsider that piece to look at, if we follow the CDC guidelines, that exceeds really the New Hampshire piece. So that's something we can consider.
Okay, thank you. I also want you, the school board, to know that Karen McLeod, Edna Miller, and I have been meeting pretty extensively with Tanya, and the other day Kyla came to that meeting. And as a result of that, as union representatives, we surveyed our union membership on a couple of things. So I would like to speak on behalf of the union as far as negotiating non-precedent setting ideas for the upcoming school year. So I'd like to have this opportunity to go over those. So our survey asked 3 questions. The first one had to do, well, actually, before I get into the first question, the questions were, number 1 was about requiring masks. We wanted to know how membership felt about requiring masks within the building. The second one was about cohort grouping. And the third question was simply, what are your concerns or creative solutions? As senses of anxiety and stress. That was very, very clear. Some of the comments were really kind of over the top when they replied back to us. We do see education as a unique entity, very different from other kinds of businesses that are open. Unlike most other industries, we work almost exclusively with children, unpredictable, impulsive energy machines. And our relationship is interactive and frequently intimate as school teachers. We feel an onerous sense of responsibility for each and every child that enters this building, whether we teach that child or not. And we're suffering from that stress. People have been bursting into tears. So we received many other responses that reflected fear over face-to-face brick-and-mortar return to school, and you need to know that many of us are afraid. We further want to let you know and have it understood by both administration and the school board that we expect and anticipate that student response to changes in school will result in increased disciplinary concerns and diminished curriculum acquisition in all areas. And we need that to be very clear, because if we're going to be held to this standard, we're not going to meet it. Not with 10 minutes of hand washing at the beginning of every class, not with not being able to have small groups, not without one-to-one opportunities. So we want to make sure that the school board and administration understand that. As far as answering question number 1, 73% of those who responded were in favor of a mandatory mask usage, and 27% for the encouraged mask usage. And that would include, I believe, in classrooms. That if a student comes and sits at a desk that is 6 feet apart from another student, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can take their mask off. If they're not going to be talking, if they're reading, taking a test, maybe. But there is a lot of leaning that happens. There's a lot of getting up and going and getting a drink that happens. Question number 2 about cohorts. 31% of our membership indicated that a cohort model should be instituted throughout the school. 47% felt that K through 5 should be a cohort model, while 6 through 8 might involve class movement to some extent, and 22% of our membership that answered this survey indicated that all students should move to all classes. So I thought that was interesting. I think that what I've heard tonight was that you are talking 5 through 8 for a modified cohort model.
K-5.
We asked members to give some creative solutions, and we've kind of summed them up here. Several members indicated that requiring masks and cohort grouping K through 2 would be difficult, and asked that you consider half days for those classes. Another item was that several members gave solutions to middle schools moving between classes using the classroom to classroom doors, which might involve some moving of classrooms. Some members wondered whether 5th grade should follow the 6 through 8 model. Okay. Specialized services, speech, OT, PT, ELL, pull-out, SPED, would require students to leave the classroom, and that's what we would expect because it would be difficult to do that within the classes. Hold on, I'm moving down. Buses were of a particular concern. 1 student per seat, temperatures taken on the bus prior to boarding, cleaning between high school and elementary runs were 3 things that came up repeatedly. We need to know that the buses are going to be cleaned between the 2 runs.
They are.
Even if that means shifting school time. But the one student per seat, if a student gets on the bus and does have a fever, we can't leave a student at a bus stop. So I don't know how that works. We were wondering if we might be able to offer COVID tests to faculty and staff on site, and whether or not we could somehow piggyback with the college. They seem to have this under control. They're doing a lot of testing, and we're wondering if we could somehow work with them. There are many concerns over sick day usage and remote teaching. There are some scenarios which might require a teacher or a staff member to remain home and while still being able to teach. When are they able to teach? What do sick days look like? And there was a lot of questions about that. So I guess I just wanted to let you know where the teachers were standing on this. They don't feel as though, I guess I need to emphasize their fears. And I'm just letting you know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick, I'm probably not going to be the most popular person in the room. As somebody who has spent the last 4 months wearing a mask 40 hours a week, y'all have no idea what you're getting into. I really, really would suggest that you reconsider making children who are 6 feet apart masks. And the reason why it has nothing to do with CO2, toxicity, or any of that other madness. I have been doing this. I would ask all of you to think about how many of you have worn a mask for 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week, and realize what you're asking second and first and kindergartners to do. pain around the ears, pain on the face, anxiety. You're gonna have kids who aren't gonna be able to get to school because of that. When you use masks, you need to use them well. Coming into the classrooms, being in the hallways, going to the bathroom, getting the water, those kids need to have those masks on so well and not touching their faces and not removing them and not doing those things. But when they're sitting in their bubbles at their desks, being able to remove their mask, assuming they're not coughing, which they'd be going home for, assuming they're not getting water, going to the bathroom, that is going to make the mask fatigue significantly less. I can tell you the adult nurses, I'm trained to wear a mask for 7 hours in an OR. And what I can tell you is my nurses, my coworkers can barely get to Friday with masks on their faces. If you guys think that K, first, second, and third graders are gonna be able to do it for 4 or 5 or 6 hours a day, then you have not done it recently. And I would encourage those of you who have done it to not to disagree with me, because and this is with everything. I have masks go behind my head, I have things that go behind me, all those kinds of things. I'm incredibly worried that what's gonna happen with my 2nd grader and my 6th grader is they are not gonna want to come to school because of pain and discomfort. Now, I'm gonna push them through it. I just took a plane trip and I made my kids wear masks for 12 hours, obviously, because I was in a high-risk situation in which they needed to do it. But when they're sitting at their desk quietly, I strongly encourage you guys to find the space to let them be without masks. Being outside as much as possible. I'm even willing to find somebody to make those little boxes that you see the kids in Thailand have on their desks, where there's the little box, it's a clear box, they sit behind, they have all their number stuff. I would be happy to work with whatever maker space that I can find that will do that, especially for the K through 3rd graders. What I'm telling you is that it's going to be very problematic to keep, especially the younger kids, but also the older kids, in masks for 30 to 40 hours a week. When I have adults who are trained to do this, not able to do it. So I understand fear. My husband is a teacher. I understand fear. I've been leaving the house for 4 months. It scares me too, and I don't blame you at all. But I also want you to think about when you really need kids to mask, they need to do it well. And that is in passing and in bathrooms. And I am pro-mask in grocery stores and I am pro-mask in Plymouth. But when they are outside, they should not be required to wear a mask. When they are within a 5 to 6 feet apart from each other, they should not be required to wear a mask, because you guys are going to get mask overload, and that's going to create a negative connotation with school. And you can walk them through it, and you can talk them through it, and I know that there's lots of teachers who think that they can do it, and I'm sure you can. But there's going to be a threshold for every kid, and some it's going to be 4 hours, and maybe those kids can't come to school. And some it's going to be 2 days, but I promise you 5 days, almost everybody's going to hit their threshold. So I'd strongly, and the masks that we're purchasing, we definitely need to be thinking about what kind of masks we're purchasing. If you're purchasing behind the ear masks, I can tell you I got about 2 days in those before it's a problem. Things behind the ears, I mean, most of you are not going out for 50 hours a week or 40 hours a week at this point in masks. Many people are staying home. But the people I talk to, my coworkers, grocery store workers, other people, will tell you the first thing I do when I run into my office is rip my mask off by Wednesday. And the kids aren't gonna have that ability, right? You, as teachers, you have a planning period for an hour. You can take your mask off for an hour. With what you're talking about, if the kids are 5 or 6 feet apart mandating masks, they're not gonna have that break, and I think that we're gonna have a big problem with it. So despite the fear, I understand your fear, I support you, I back you up, but I really think that we need to consider that when a child is sitting at their desk, that they should be able to take their mask off. That's it.
Thank you.
I just have 2 questions. One, we had talked about, parents, checking temperatures at home and having everyone have responsibility. So what happens with the kid who, I have 2 kids, one has symptoms, one doesn't? Are you going to be checking to make sure I keep both kids home? Because there may be some of those parents who say, oh, I'm going to send this one, he's not sick, he's, or you might have an 8th grader and a high schooler. Are we checking to make sure so that there isn't that? Because one kid may show symptoms and one may not. So I think we need to think about the parents who sometimes give the Tylenol and send the kid to school. Are they going to send one and keep one home? Because it's easier to teach one instead of a bunch. And the other is special education. So I have a child who's in special education. And how are you going to do that if they have to wear a mask being closer than 6 feet. It's speech therapy. You have to see their mouth. He has to see the other person. How is that going to work? Because remote special education did not work. And it was no fault of the school. I got the calls, we did the videos, but we made 0 progress. And he is supposed to be able to learn this year, starting kindergarten. You can't read if you can't speak? So those are my questions of how the school is gonna address those sorts of things.
Can you say your name? We have people that
Katie.
want to know the audience name.
So I'm going to go one at a time and just let you know that for the special educators, we've bought masks that are clear, and there are shields for the speech and language in particular. And we have a discussion going on with the speech and language therapists about a plexiglass barrier, although that individual has said she really wants to be able to be close enough to cue and to really support kids who have behavioral components to their therapy as well. It's not just, make this sound. Sometimes you need to really support that student in that therapy moment. And our speech and language pathologist is really committed to getting back in the building and to seeing the kids up close. In terms of knowing whether or not two kids we will not know. And reality is that all the data shows that people are asymptomatic and can still and have no symptoms and be passing it. And there's nothing that we will be able to say absolutely that they are fine to be in the building. We will address issues with parents if we think that they are being less than diligent directly with those parents individually. I do think that's going to take some education and I think that parents need some support right now, and we may have to get creative with them about how we support them in that moment. But it's a one-to-one conversation and an open dialogue, and saying we really cannot risk the other kids and staff in this building in that moment. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be if you're sending your kids or you work in this building, is sort of managing that uncertainty, right? And if we move ahead with in-person, that will be a component of where we move to, or what we shoulder, is that uncertainty and that anxiety and fear that Jen spoke to. And tonight's, the first moment to start to talk about that as a community.
Is there any talk, Tanya, of getting plexiglass barriers for desks?
So we have talked a little bit about that, and keeping those clean as an additional surface has been a concern. So with for certain specialists, I think, that are evaluating or speech, are we changing the requirement for whatever they're using, whether it's a clear mask, a shield, and a mask? The shield does not count as a mask, so it would be both. And other strategies that we were looking at. We have not talked about universally putting those plexiglass pieces in place.
Thank you. Linda?
Could you say your first and last name, actually?
Sure.
So the people on Zoom can hear?
Sure, my name is Linda Corvo. I just wanted to go back to what Amy had mentioned about that Friday going into Labor Day weekend, where it is not a 4-day weekend, it is actually a 5-day weekend. I too would like that Friday reconsidered as a new school day. I think especially in a normal year, going in for 2 partial weeks and then being out for 5 days is a challenge, but I think this year especially. And I'm not sure of your name.
My name?
Yeah.
I'm Jennifer Deloge.
Jennifer brought up some bus concerns. Not necessarily an overarching bus concern to riding during COVID, but I would like to see a better relationship between the school and the buses and relaying information to the parents. There was an entire section of Langdon left behind at some point last year. My child was one of them, and I didn't believe him until my neighbor pulled me aside at 5:30 to tell me what had happened. And when I called the school, I was told, I was asked how the other kids got to school. And my answer is, I don't know, because I only know that my neighbor picked up my child. But then the other option was for me to, in order to find out what had happened, was for me to then, after calling the school, was to call the bus company. So I would like to see a more seamless relationship between the school and the bus versus feeling passed off. And I think especially these days where there's going to be more, not requirements, but more awareness and more rigidity around getting kids on the buses and that kind of stuff. It's just, an experience I had, so non-COVID related, my child was left behind along with an entire section of Langdon last year.
So we have questions from the chat. Would you like me to read those to you?
So
How do you want to?
I would scroll to the top. So we had asked that questions don't get put in the chat because it's hard to do that. So I would ask that we call on folks that either wrote a question to verbally say their question or a statement, as well as if they say, I have a question,
All right, so the first person is Sarah Tyrell. She has a question. So Sarah will unmute herself and give us her question, and I'm going to just make sure that...
Okay. I have several questions. Do you want me to just start with the one that I put in the chat, or do you want me to ask all of my questions now?
You can ask your questions. Sorry.
I'm still not sure what I'm supposed to do. One question. Got it. Okay. If my child is experiencing a symptom, one symptom, a sore throat, and I keep them home, does that count as an absence? And is there any sort of support for remote learning for that day or multiple days because they have a runny nose for a week? How does that work?
I think that the way that we would handle that, Sarah, is that the student would be able to click into the Google Classroom for the day and to see the assignments, and that our hope would be that we would have staff in the building who could support that student at home. It would not be a full day of instruction, nor would it count as a sick day. If they were engaging in learning, that would not count as a sick day. I do not think that sick days are going to be, for students, will be an issue this year.
We'll be very flexible with
We'll be
sick days.
extremely flexible with that. So, before I take myself off mute, I want to say that I'd like Sarah to go through all of her questions. Are you all comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay. So, Sarah, what's your next question?
Oh,
We can't hear you.
There was a little bit of discussion around potentially teachers getting in on the PSU testing through Quest. If there's a positive test, what's the response and when do people go back to school? I mean the whole school. So for example, there's 3 positive tests or Kyla declares today a remote day because 10 teachers are out. How long does that outage last and what makes you determine when people go back?
so the recommendation would be again from DHHS and local officials, so there is no specific time for specific cases. I think we have to take individual cases and the recommendations from DHHS. The COVID spread piece to remote would definitely be from outside sources as a recommendation of when to shut down and go to remote learning. As far as a staffing piece, it would be a matter of Tanya and Kelly calling and saying, listen, we have 6 teachers out, I cannot cover tomorrow, but depending on what the teachers are, can you give us a remote learning day?
Thanks, that covers all of my questions for now.
Melissa, you are next. Melissa Query.
Hi, thank you. My questions were really answered with Sarah's, but it was just more along multi-day, sick children tends to happen pretty much all fall. So if we decide to come back in person, it sounds like we would stick with our teacher through Google Classroom and just maintain that at home until they're able to come back. Okay, perfect, thank you.
When you announce the speaker, can you give the person who will be after them a heads up that they'll be next. It
Yes.
really helps
I'm down.
them to be prepared for
Okay.
their turn coming up.
Yes. So next up is Meredith Flynn. So I'm going to unmute myself and we're going to listen to Meredith Flynn. And after that, it's going to be Sarah's iPad. And I don't know who that is, but we're going to start with Meredith.
Yeah, my question is, if the child has an IEP, would they be supported in their IEP services if we chose the remote learning option?
I'm going to answer that question and say yes. So we will be supporting students on an IEP if they choose the full remote learning option. What that looks like exactly would be, we have to figure some of those details out, but it would be with our special educators. And we would be working with VLAX to figure out the best way that we might integrate with them if there were accommodations. But the answer in brief is yes. And we have some work to do to better understand how we would do that. It would probably happen virtually over a computer screen as it did in the spring. Does that answer your question, Meredith? Okay. And Sarah's iPad is next.
Sarah's iPad is Sarah Moon, and she does not have a microphone, so you'll have to read the question.
Is there a question below that?
Sarah's question is, as a single mother, if we switch to remote learning, would we, single parents, be able to send the child anyways? For example, having a select few with certain circumstances, such as single parenthood, who still can send their kids, only asking as a single mom with 100% custody. And Sarah, we at this point do not have a plan to allow that to happen if we went to 100% remote. I think that our job is to be as flexible as we can with people. That being said, we have faculty who have a contract, and this agreement that we will have between the teachers union and the school board, and figuring out what that support would be is a little bit up in the air. I have looked into a model that the New York Times had advertised called SCOL, S-C-O-L, which was something about supporting those students who had really specific circumstances. And we are willing to consider that option and to move forward with that if the board approved it. But we have a lot more working out to do in order to make that happen.
Who's next?
Melissa, and I can never say your last name, Melissa. So Melissa, can you unmute yourself?
And then who's after Melissa?
Jenny Tebow has a question, so she's next.
Okay, my question was the same as hers. So for Kindergarten Connection Day, I actually have three questions. Kindergarten Connection Day, is there a plan for that?
Yes. Yes, there is a plan for Kindergarten Connections, but we're waiting a little bit until after this school board meeting to launch that. So it would be possibly the third or fourth week in August, and it would be something like a come to school activity for everyone focused on ice cream, and we would have an activity outside where we practice some physical distance, and the kindergartners would get to meet their teachers. But we still have to work the details out about that because the teachers are not contracted during that time, and there are some pretty specific hurdles that we have to overcome if we're going to offer that day. That being said, I have a couple of kindergarten teachers and specialists who are interested in that, and we have begun that conversation.
Oh, I can't hear.
Hold on, Jenny, we can't hear you.
Jenny, we can't hear you. Oh, hold on. Start again now.
My second grader specifically asked me to ask this question. Is there going to be any playground time?
Yes, there will be playground time. It will be a little different. It will not be huge groups of kids out at the playground, but we want kids to come to school and have fun. So there will be playground time. There will be physical distancing during that time, and possibly some new teaching during that time about how to be physically distant, but engaged and having fun with your friends. Did you have any?
My last question is one, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
My last question is a little bit further in the future. Travel during Thanksgiving. Do we think that the travel restriction will still probably be on? And if we travel to, say, New York City, will we have to take 2 weeks off, like keep our kids home for 2 weeks after that?
We don't know.
We don't know yet. We haven't gotten that far. But it is a very good question and we should be thinking about it. So thank you for the question. Jenny, are you all set?
All set.
Mike's song. Oh, we can't hear you, Mike.
Probably better that way. Sorry.
Is your microphone working, Mike?
Are we good now?
Now we're good, yes.
Sorry about that. Got a little anxious and pressed it twice, I think. So I got several questions. You guys kind of answered, but it was more like hinted at. And I just wanted to get more clarification. And this is regarding testing and protocol if someone does test positive and all that stuff. So my question to start with is, if a child tests positive, right, or if, say we start, it's now Thursday into the second week, and the child is starting to show symptoms, or the faculty or staff is starting to show symptoms, they get tested. We're looking at anywhere between, on a good day for results, 72-hour turnaround time. If you're on the unlucky side, we're looking at up to 18, 19 days to get your result. And I'm wondering, what's the school's protocol? If we look and say on the positive side, say the result comes back in 48 hours and the person tested positive. Well, now this is 48 hours after they were tested, and we don't know how long they were symptomatic and asymptomatic. So they could have been spreading this for up to a week and a half prior to getting tested. So what is the school gonna do? What's the protocol that's in place? I know, excuse me, I know that you had mentioned that that you guys are gonna follow DHHS guidelines, CDC guidelines, but they're not gonna know real time. And so my concern is, okay, week and a half has gone by, this child, faculty, staff member, visitor, if they're there on a daily basis, has now been spreading, potentially spreading for a week and a half, plus those 2 days for waiting for testing. So I understand you guys have cleaning protocols, you're gonna isolate, but I'm just wondering if that scenario has been considered. And you guys also mentioned the threshold, but no real number or no real concrete example was given, other than you guys are gonna follow the state guidelines. And for me, I'm a little worried about that kind of, I'm just wondering if there is a plan in place.
So our guidance from SPEAR and from the Department of Public Health is that we won't know. If the child is symptom-free and has been, then they would be allowed back in the building. That it would be the doctor's job to say whether or not teachers were allowed, individuals, staff or students were allowed in the building, and that we would assume and ask that parents or staff people follow the doctor's advice, but we are not doctors, and that those professionals need to be making that decision.
But if DHHS is, you know, I don't know what the staffing looks like at DHHS once all these schools are calling every day with positive or symptoms and whatnot. We do have an understanding with SPEAR that we can reach out immediately and get assistance and recommendations, and we would reach out to our local town health official as well, in case DHHS isn't, you know, if we're not getting the response immediately, we would reach out to our locals.
Rachel Weeks is next.
Sorry, did you, I had a couple more questions, but I was just wondering, contact tracing is in place, or protocol for it is in place?
Yeah, they will help us with the contact tracing.
So the Department of Public Health would manage the contact tracing for us. We would not be doing that. We're not experts in that. So the Department of Public Health would come in and do that. They have a number that's listed that we call, and if there was a positive case, they would come in and manage that for us, which is why we are having assigned seats and cohorting, so that contact tracing, that's the recommendation from them in order to ease that contact tracing, and that the assigned seats are for every day. And that you sit in the same seat in every, or next to the same people in every classroom, so that contact tracing would be aided that way.
Okay, sorry, I got two last quick questions. One is masks are, if a child is playing on the playground or in the middle of the day, drops the mask. Mm-hmm. Is the school going to be providing masks for that child to replace? Or what's the school's recommendation on that?
So we do have 2 masks purchased for each student and each staff person. Reusable masks. So we will have masks that we can give them, and we do have a washing machine and dryer on site so that we can wash those. So the answer is yes. We also have bought disposable masks, some, to aid in that process in case there's a short-term need, and we can just wash a mask.
And I think, you know, our plan is kind of back to school list. If kids can provide their own masks, great. And if they don't have them, we have, just like if they forget their mittens or their snow pants, you can go get a mask. So we'll have 2 for each student and then extras as needed.
And lanyards?
So we are working on the lanyard. So that was a question from Jen Deloge in the back of the room. We had met and we had talked about having a lanyard so that, thank you, so that students would have a place to store their mask and keep their mask, so it doesn't, you know, where's my mask is always a question, right? And it's an easy way to sort of manage that mask wearing. I think that we will move ahead with that. We've got some different questions about how you store masks the right way, and whether or not that's the right way to be managing that situation. And there's some different guidance around that. If we're gonna use masks, we should be using them the right way, right? And how do we keep them sanitary and free of other virus?
It just about the lanyard. So my 5-year-old has one of the lanyards, and it works well because it just falls to his chest, and I just have him tuck it into his shirt, and that way he's not playing with it. Right. And so for the younger kids, I would definitely recommend that because it'll also keep it on them so they're not stuffing it in their pockets and using it and playing with it.
Right. Rachel Weeks has a question.
Sorry, I had one last question. Sorry. The last thing I wanted to ask was, there was a thing at the school that I was not a big fan of, and that was the whole idea of students being table washers. I'm hoping, just because I've just heard stories, and that's just, to me, just another opportunity for some other infectious agent to be spread. And so I'm wondering if the school is rethinking that, having students be table washer policy. And one final note to close, thanks for all you guys have been doing with the opening and the planning. I appreciate all the work that the board's been doing and all the teachers and all their efforts.
Thank you, Mike. So we have not considered anything about table washing for students at this point, but we will make note of your concern. So I will give that some thought with Kelly Carey and some other folks. There are people in the chat who are chiming in, and at this point, I'm not going to, do you want me to read every?
I would just ask if they want to speak.
Okay,
If anybody
so
put a comment.
Lori Cleary and Kat Labrie and Melissa.
So why don't you call on Lori Cleary first?
Lori Cleary.
What happened to Rachel Weeks?
What about Rachel Weeks?
You skipped Rachel.
Oh, what do you want to say? Lori? Oh, tell Lori she's on.
Lori, you're on.
Yeah, I just want to say that we haven't really had a great discussion about what we want for the back-to-school plan, but I don't want to be represented as a union with what was represented by Jen Deloge. We have a lot to discuss.
I'm sure that there are lots of different opinions from different staff people. So I do think that Jen made a great attempt to categorize all of the feedback in the document, and I recommend that if you have something specific that you would like to say to the group, that you can do that, or you could reach out to your union leadership and ask that your perspectives be included as well.
Who's next?
Rachel Weeks.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. I had two questions. One was already answered. It was about mask storage because I'm a little concerned about contamination with the donning and dashing of the mask on and off. As we know that can spread germs pretty easily from touching. But it sounds like you're working on that with lanyards. My question is, I heard you refer to the 5 through 8 model as modified cohorts. If you could explain that a little bit more. I have a child that's going into 5th grade, so I'd like to know what that cohort is looking like if it's a modified cohort.
So for the 5th grade, we are thinking that we would keep the homeroom together, but that they need to get to their math specialist, and they need to get, rather than having one teacher who teaches all the subject areas, as it is in K through 4, in the 5th through 8th grade, we have content-specific teachers. So the homeroom would stay together as a group, but would shift to teachers' classrooms at this point. In 5th grade, I need to work out whether or not the teachers could move between classrooms. There's a conversation going about whether or not it makes sense for one person to move, but we need to make that on a case-by-case decision based on the materials needed. I don't know if the 5th grade science teacher feels that she needs access to her entire room and all of her supplies. So that detail would need to get worked out. But what I can say is that that homeroom would travel together and not commingle during class time. Do you have other questions, Rachel?
Was the one about the mask storage, but you had touched upon it about talking about your thinking about lanyards.
Okay.
Thank you.
So next up is Kat Labrie, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Lori, so if either you, Kat or Lori, want to say something else, there is time here. I'm going to unmute, and either of you could speak.
Yeah, this is Kat. I would just like to say that I understand that our union body has to be represented in full, but I also would like to say that I'm on a different idea than some of what our union representation has stated tonight, and that's it.
And Lori, did you have something you wanted to say?
represented by PES.
What's that?
So what Lori said is that she presents the plan that was presented, or that she supports the plan that was presented, and she just wants folks to know that. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Melissa.
Did you get Karen McLeod? Yeah.
Melissa, we can hear you.
We lost her before,
She
too.
was up on the committee, she never chimed in.
Could Melissa
Can
type
Melissa
her
type
question?
her question?
At the bottom. Karen, you're next.
Oh, she can't. Hold on, Karen, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you. Can you unmute?
She is.
She's muted
She's back
still.
on mute again,
There she is.
but we can't hear her.
We're trying. Give us 1 sec. Try again, Karen.
She has her mute on.
She keeps, bouncing back and forth.
Tell her her mute is on.
Your mute is on.
Okay, now it's on.
Now it's off.
Or is that you doing that?
My sound is on. Karen, we can't hear you.
Hold on a sec, we're just
Hold
trying
on
to
1
resolve.
second.
It sounds like the other people on Zoom can hear her, but we can't. So just hold on. Bear with us,
Can you hear me
Karen.
now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Thank you. I'm Karen McLeod, co-president of Plymouth Education Association. And I want to thank everyone for all their efforts, the 70-plus individuals. It's been amazing and an eye-opening task. But I think it's important for the board to know that our members have not seen this document. And these changes are changes in our working conditions, which are subject to collective bargaining. And I just think, in all fairness to our members, it would behoove all of us to just give our members some time to sieve through this, some time for us to process with them. And I mean, as Jen Deloge so eloquently spoke about the results of our very brief survey, it was quite moving to read through those comments. And it just, it blew me away. And I really feel, in all fairness to our members, we have 43 members in our bargaining unit. I would really urge the board to table voting on this document today. I know it says a draft and everything is fluid, but if you could just give us time to process together as a group in a Zoom meeting and get back to you in a very timely fashion to work toward something that makes all of us feel a bit more comfortable. We want to be back in the classroom, but there's a couple of items that we do need to discuss. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
So just so people know, Melissa and Sarah's iPad agreed with Britt. Karen has spoken, and Lori Cleary has spoken. Sarah's iPad said, I support it too. It's the better option for us single moms. Sarah had a question, which I believe we've answered. Is that correct, Sarah?
Yeah.
Just give no, wait.
I have one more small question.
Okay.
Do you have any guidelines around mask care? Like, how frequently are we supposed to wash our kids' masks? You give us to...
We will have that, yeah.
We will give an update on that. Stephanie Halter is next.
Did you have a question, or? Anybody? Instead of going through the chat, if you can just ask if anybody else has a question to type it in. Because I think there's a lot of comments, which we're asking for no comments, but if you can just put, if you would like to speak.
Can I just go through the chat in order, because I will not speak to the comments, but I'm going to speak to the questions.
Yes.
Okay. So Kelly Masks asked, so will a doctor's note be required to return to school? And the answer is no. That the Plymouth Pediatrics and Spear Memorial Hospital is stating that will not be provided.
Is there any more, Tanya?
Nope.
No
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I thought you were just pausing.
No, I was going through the whole list.
Okay, perfect, okay. So at this point, I'm gonna shut down the public comment for this meeting. I was unaware that the teachers union had not seen a draft of this reopening plan. I think it would be important to have their input, of course, because they are.
Just to clarify, I absolutely agree with you, and I actually recommend that.
Yeah.
The leadership has seen a version of it. They saw one on Thursday and one again on Monday. I did request that they not share it with the body until you had seen it, because I felt strongly that the school board needed some time to digest it. And but I thoroughly agree with you that the membership needs some time to look at that as well.
So I'd like to postpone the voting on this until we have a Zoom meeting next week. I'm assuming we're gonna have a meeting next week.
Can I
So
recommend
we're-
Have a meeting next week?
that we move forward with considering this, and that if there are concerns, we can amend it later?
So there is a process that I can talk to you a little bit about as far as an advisory. You can conceptually move it forward and then consider anything from the teachers. We're going to meet in 2 weeks. We can tweak it.
Right.
So it's not this is it, this is the whole thing, but to move forward with at least communicating with parents about in-person or the planning time that we need. We can tweak as needed and listen to any other recommendations from the union as well, and I can go into a little bit about that a little bit more.
It's not the Bible, right? I mean, it's a good document, but we've acknowledged from the beginning it's a fluid document, and so I think in order to keep the progress on track, we need to probably talk about approving it in principle with the idea that it's going to change, and it's going to change again, and it's going to change again. So I would be in favor of that.
Could I suggest that we possibly, the number 16, adopt Plymouth Elementary back-to-school guidelines in entirety? Instead of having that, we put it as a fluid document and in process, or something like that?
You can even put conceptually approve the plan as, and that really lends itself to gathering more feedback. I mean, we know it's fast, but as far as process, the board should see and the union leadership should see before we release it to all the teachers and the community members without the board's approval. So it's the board's As far as process, the board approves it, and then we can work with the teachers on the feedback. So
I'm just
as
not
far as
comfortable
process-
with in its entirety.
Yeah, you can tweak that if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so does someone want to make a motion tweaking that last piece?
Do you have any, I don't know, I said it's a fluid document and in process,
You can approve the recommendations and amend the last recommendation to conceptually approve the plan, sorry, I'm thinking as I'm saying this, with further considerations from faculty, staff.
I would also like to propose an amendment to recommendation 13 to include voting training.
I couldn't hear you.
I would like to propose an amendment to 13, which is limit building use to school functions, parks and recs, after-school program, voting, and voting training.
Okay. Great.
Can I ask a question though? I mean, we have the primary, what day is it?
September 8th.
Day after Labor Day. It's Tuesday.
I know what you're saying as far as the dates go and start of school, but I'm, just, I don't know, I'm just a little concerned in general having voting as a global, we approved it, and that's definitely going to happen all year long or whatever. I don't know.
Fortunately, we
That was
can
at the
somewhat
town's request, yeah.
quarantine that area and make it fairly.
Yeah, it's only one way in, one way out.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that after voting, the whole gymnasium would be disinfected using all the tools that the school uses.
Yes.
I feel much more confident knowing that we have independent air handlers for multiple areas of the schools.
I have other concerns besides just COVID with voting on the school property this year. Just such a controversial.
But there will be no
year.
kids in school.
Yeah.
So we have no kids.
No.
That's
there's
why
no,
we're not having school on the days of elections.
I know, that's true.
We know the emotions behind this year's election, and so
Right.
any school that's holding voting, we're recommending that there's no school that day. It's too much to bring on.
Okay.
And there is.
Sometimes there are kids in school during voting, depending on what we're voting on, so that's why I want to make sure it's.
This year it's a no.
There's no kids
We
in the
may see
building during
lower
that time.
turnout as there are, the state has approved absentee voting for both the primary and the general election this fall.
Okay.
So people may be taking advantage of voting
Yep.
from home and not showing up in person.
Frank stated in the chat that he thinks the union should have a chance to look at it first, and that was at 8:19. Frank, I'm going to unmute you and...
That wasn't me. I think that was Meredith Flynn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry.
We're going to, yeah.
One final comment before we get that. I'm still a little hung up on having had the same experience that Britt had, wearing a mask for 8 hours every day. If you haven't done it and we think everybody's going to do it and it's going to be a lot of fun, it isn't. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. There's part of me that says if they're 6 feet apart, maybe we need to consider that. I think
So in our
conceptually.
recommendation, that is our recommendation, is when, so we went, there was a lot of confusion when the guidelines came out between 3 and 6 feet and 5 feet and what you're supposed to do within all those measurements. And when we talked to, when we had our meeting the other day, the medical professionals were on board with kids sitting in seats and taking their masks off if they're 6 feet apart. That is in the recommendation that I put.
Do we need to add that little?
It's in the plan, so it's already in there as part of it. So that is something, that we just look for the medical backing on that piece as well. So we're trying to just stay with the recommendations that we're getting.
Understand, thank you. And they're going to change.
Yeah. Does Frank have any questions, comments? Oh, hold on, Frank.
Oh,
Go ahead.
good, okay. I'd agree with Mike and Britt as someone who does wear a mask 8 hours a day. It's not comfortable. And it's, I think it's going to be harder to enforce that with younger kids. I know that also that we've got in the plan for scheduled mask breaks, and I was actually very encouraged to see how much distance was going to be between the desks and the teachers, so the children between each other and the teachers, which the two things that have been shown to mitigate the spread of this is social distancing or physical distancing and the proper use of masks. So I think, you've done a great job with putting this all together, and I think we're in a good starting place. I think this is great as a first draft.
Perfect, thank you.
I will move that we approve the suite of recommendations numbered 1 through 16 with amendments to 13 to include voting training, and with an amendment to 16 to strike in its entirety from the language. I think that's assumed that gives us the flexibility to move forward. So that's my motion.
Yep.
What was the term, what was the?
To cross out entirety.
Right, but what was you had said?
The conceptual plan, I said.
Conceptually approved.
Can we have that?
And anything is conceptual. I think
Yeah.
we can amend it moving forward.
Yeah.
If you'd like to add, I think it's actually better to have this be a defined document that we start with, and then that, I think it removes questions about what it is, and if we need to amend it in the future, we can do that.
Someone want a second? Phil's?
I'll second that.
Okay. So we'll take a verbal vote.
I would do a roll call considering Frank's on the,
Yeah. So we'll start with Frank.
Yes.
Phil?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes for me.
thank you.
Unanimous. Thank you.
If we could schedule a board meeting for 2 weeks to review the plan once again. I am looking at either Monday the 10th or Wednesday the 12th.
Are there any selectmen's meeting that would conflict?
Is there a selectman on?
On the 10th?
I thought that, there is a selectman on? Is there a meeting?
So can we ask the Tyrells to let us know if there's a select board meeting Monday the 10th? Yes,
Okay.
there is.
Okay, then we won't do it that night. We'll do I'd recommend the 12th if possible.
I'm okay with the 12th.
Do you want to stick with 6 o'clock?
Yeah, let's do 6.
Yes.
Parks and Rec meeting for 5 to 7.
We've got to go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So Frank, does that work for you?
Yes.
we'll still be able to zoom in at that point, we think? Because I don't know if I can be here in person that night.
So, yeah, so we've been trying to meet in person if we're planning to come back in person, but if you're away or anything like that, or working and still having the community have the option for Zoom, that's fine as well.
Thanks.
Okay, so August 12th at 6 p.m.
It's definitely not perfect, but
Yeah.
we'll try to get it.
It's a Wednesday.
When is life perfect?
Yeah,
All
true.
right. And did you want to talk about the facilities?
Yes. So John Francis has let me know that our data room cooling system is failing and will need to be replaced. And the worst case scenario for that is $11,100 to replace the cooling to keep our entire technology system moving and functioning. He doesn't think it will be that high, but I want to let the board know about that unexpected cost in our budget.
Do you need approval?
Yes.
Yeah, up to that cost.
What line, where does that come?
So it comes out of facilities. I mean, you have a repairs and maintenance, it's an unexpected piece, so you have to approve it if it goes above a certain amount.
I see. Okay.
I will move that we approve up to $11,000 to repair or replace the data cooling system.
11,100?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
11,100?
Yes.
11,100.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, got a verbal vote. Frank?
Just give us a heads up, Frank. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, Phil?
Thumbs up.
Yes.
Fran?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Yes. Unanimous, thank you.
We do have a few.
We have some other,
We have some non-public.
Non-public.
okay. All
Or-
right, so make motion, someone want to make motion?
Motion to adjourn,
You gotta do a roll call.
Public?
non-public rather, not an adjournment. Yes, I'll make that motion.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay.